Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we still have a few folks trickling in, so you'll probably hear me dilly-dallying just a little bit here in the beginning. But I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I work with EGLE. I'm in our Environmental Support Division, and I'm going to be the moderator for the community update meeting that we're having tonight. So this meeting is focused on the area around Graphic Packaging International in Kalamazoo. We have a pretty packed night for you tonight, so we're hoping that we can get a lot done and that folks get something out of this. We are pretty excited to be able to host this tonight. So I don't want to hold folks up for too long, but I'm going to go over a few housekeeping things before we get started into all the real details about the meeting. So the first thing, I know we do have some folks that are calling in, so really appreciate people calling in. We will try to be as cognizant of that as we possibly can. We do have some presentations and some slides, but our panelists and our speakers tonight are aware that we are going to have folks calling in, so we'll try to explain what the other folks are seeing as best as we can. And after the meeting, if you feel very passionate about seeing what we were seeing, we can figure out a way to get copies of those slides to you. So that shouldn't be a problem. So just wanted to kind of set the stage on that one. Probably repeat myself a couple of times too, just to let you know. So all your lines are going to be muted during the meeting tonight, and we are recording the meeting. So what we usually do is we will take this recording and we upload it to our YouTube channel, which is at Michigan EGLE on YouTube. It should be up there. I would love to say for sure tomorrow, but probably in the next couple of days. We do get those transcribed so that folks that either are visually impaired and would like closed captioning, things like that, or the closed captioning can also be transcribed into other languages. So if you have folks that you know that have English as a second language or something like that, that would prefer to be able to read in their own language, there is the capability of that as well. So very high level, how are we going to work things out tonight? I know the press release and some of the information that we put out talked about this being a community update meeting. So there's been a lot of activities going on in the area around graphic packaging for the last year or so, and we have a lot of things to share. We don't want to overshare because we don't want to kind of pack everybody with tons of information where you feel like you're on the overload. You might still feel that way. I just want to put that out there. But what we're going to be doing is I have a few speakers from our partner agencies and from EGLE. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we're going to be giving you kind of some updates on some of the activities that have been going on. A lot of air sampling has been going on, and we don't have all the answers for you tonight, but we're hoping that this meeting will at least set the stage for some of the things we do have answers to and things that we're still working on, so that down the road when we have our next meeting, hopefully you'll come join. You'll be able to learn a little bit more, build a little bit on what we talked about tonight. There is going to be an opportunity for you to ask us questions. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. No pressure, you certainly do not have to. Because we have a lot of different folks talking about a lot of different things. And I think that there might be some like, what did we just talk about kind of things. We probably will take a little bit of a pause. I'll check the chat box to see if there's questions about what we just talked about. So if there's some clarification needed, things like that in between our speakers, we'll try to do that as well. We'll probably save the most of the questions for the end, but just wanted to let you know that at some of our sort of intermissions or when we're switching from one speaker to another, kind of one topic to another, I'll look and just see if there's any of those clarifying questions in the chat box before we get started. So that brings me to how can you ask a question? So like I said, when we're kind of laying the groundwork for the things we're going to talk about, we're probably going to be really focusing on that question and answer box. Sometimes it's easier for folks to just type their question out in there. We're going to be kind of going through things in a certain order, and I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. So you might have a question in your mind right now that you really want to make sure it gets asked, but we might be answering that question kind of later on down the road. So just want to let you know that if we don't get to those questions immediately when you ask, that we'll get to them in the end. So sometimes just typing those in will be really helpful. If you are really feeling passionate about speaking out loud, some people don't feel comfortable with that. So again, no pressure, but you can use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. And then for folks calling in, you do have an opportunity to verbalize your questions as well. So once we get to that Q&A at the end of the night tonight, you're going to just want to press #2 on your phone. That will raise your hand for me, and I'll do my best to unmute you. Usually it works. just putting it out there that once in a while we do have a little bit of a trouble, but we will do our best to make sure that we can unmute you so that you can ask your question. I'll remind you how to do all of this stuff at the end when we get there. So just to let you know, again, you'll be hearing me repeat myself probably a few times tonight. All right, so I have all my speakers that are going to be on our panel tonight, and I want to just introduce all of them. So if you guys can turn your cameras on just for a minute here, so folks can see who you are. You're going to be hearing from most of these people later on in the evening, but I want to introduce them first. I'm just going to mention Jim Ostrowski. He is my co-host tonight. He's going to be working behind the scenes. So if you see his name up there, there's Jim. And so if I need help, I might call out for him, Jim, help me. And he'll be there to help me along. So I'm going to introduce folks in the order that you're going to be hearing from them tonight. So hopefully that will be a little bit easier for you. So the first person after I get done chatting with you is going to be Monica Brothers, and she works with EGLE. She's the inspector for graphic, and she's the inspector for a lot of the facilities there in Kalamazoo. Then after that, we're going to be hearing from Marta Foco from US EPA Region 5. She's going to be talking about one of the air monitoring studies that were done. After we hear from Marta, we're going to be switching over to Keisha Williams. She's a toxicologist in our air quality division, and she's going to be talking to you guys about some of the health information that we've been doing some data collection and evaluation on. So she's going to be talking about that. We're going to close up the night with a couple of our folks from DHHS, from the Department of Health and Human Services, and that is going to be Bill Farrell and Brandon Reed. Probably mostly hear from Brandon, but we're going to have Bill on our panel as well. And they're going to be talking to you guys more about some of the health information that has come out of the studies that we've been doing. We also have Jason Wolf on our panel. He's with our Air Quality Division Enforcement Unit. He's mostly here just to kind of listen, but he is going to be available if there's any questions that come up that he can answer. We also have another one of our partner agencies that is listening in on sort of the attendee side, like you folks are. They've been really sort of supportive in an advisory role for the team of people that you see here and a bunch of other people that aren't on panel but have been working on a lot of these projects as well. And that's our Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. So they're listening in. I know some folks have reached out to them. I just want to let you know that they are present listening. And again, if we can't get to your questions tonight, or we can't answer the questions that you have tonight because we just aren't quite there yet, we'll definitely tell you ways that we'll be able to get back to you. So if my speakers want to go ahead and turn their cameras off, Monica, you might want to leave yours on because I know you're going to be speaking in just a minute here, but up to you. All right, so this kind of lays out what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to give you some background on graphic packaging, a little bit of the work that Monica's been doing. Some of you might know her, you might have talked to her on the phone if you called in a complaint or called to ask her questions, or maybe you participated in a couple of the air permitting public comment sessions and hearings that we've had previously for graphic packaging. So she's going to give us some background on the company and really sort of help lay the groundwork for some of the other things that we've been really working on with this team of people. We're going to be talking about the different sampling events. So like I said, we have Marta talking about the work that EPA has done with us. We've got Keisha talking about some of the other sampling that's been done. You can see these listed out, the EnviroSuite data, which again, these are words that will make a little bit more sense as we go through the evening. So we're going to be talking about details on that. We're going to be doing the Q&A, and then after we get done with that, I will talk to you about where to find more information. And I will also be giving you, if for those of you that are watching online, if you want to, scratch down how to contact the folks that we're hearing from tonight. But otherwise, I will speak aloud Monica's contact information, so at least you have a point of contact if you're just calling in. So if you have a pen and a piece of paper and you want to, get ready to take any notes down, that would probably be helpful as well. All right, so a little bit about setting the stage for the meeting tonight. So, why are we here has been kind of a really important question that I think community is asking. So how did we get to this point, right? So one of the things that we've really heard about from community is the fact that this community in particular feels very overburdened and underrepresented, especially from an environmental justice standpoint. So when we were first working on a couple of the permitting actions a couple of years ago, this was definitely something that we looked into. We heard quite a few members of community bringing up the fact that, this is an environmental justice community and there are certain things that EGLE should be looking at specifically. And we definitely concur with that evaluation, the community self-evaluation. So once we were looking at that and kind of listening to what was coming in, these are just some kind of overall questions that we really felt stood out to us as partner agencies is, what is causing the odors that community is experiencing? How are those odors affecting folks' health? Are they affecting folks' health? These are questions that the community brought to us, and we really felt strongly about working on getting answers, which is kind of why we are here tonight. Some of the studies that we did were pretty long-term, some were short, and they told us different things, and kind of compiling all of that information and evaluating what we got out of that is what's bringing us here tonight. Now, again, want to just put it out there that we do not have all the answers for all of your questions probably tonight. But we are planning on having more meetings after this, and we really want to make sure that we're addressing these concerns for all of you and giving you the answers that you want. So, Monica, I know you are ready to give a little bit of the company's history, so I'm going to go ahead and pass that over to you here a minute. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and share your screen. I'll let you know how it looks from this end.
All right.
All right, that looks great.
Good to go. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Monica Brothers, and I am the EGLE Air Quality Inspector for Kalamazoo County. Today, I'm going to give you an overview of all of the activities that have been going on lately related to odors in the area around graphic packaging. This includes some monitoring and sampling projects, as well as some odor mitigation activities. But before I dive into that, I'd first like to give you a little background information on graphic packaging. They make coated paperboard, which is like a thin cardboard, which then gets turned into things like Kleenex boxes and cereal boxes. This location has been a paper mill since about the 1920s, but graphic packaging bought the facility around the year 2000. There are two parts to the plant. There's the paperboard mill, which uses recycled paper products to make new paperboard in two paper machines. After the paperboard is made, it is sent to the second part of the plant, which prints designs on the paperboard and folds and glues the paperboard into various shapes and sizes. The paperboard plant also has its own wastewater treatment area located on the east side of the property. This is used to remove solids and treat the water before reuse in the plant, or to treat the water before it goes next door to the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant. So why are we here? EGLE has received many odor complaints from citizens over the past 10 years. I'm the one who receives these complaints and goes out to investigate them. During an odor investigation, I go out to wherever the complaint was made. I then analyze the odors in the area by taking into account the odor's intensity on a 1 to 5 scale and the duration and frequency of those odors. I will also try to trace back the odors to a specific location. If the odor is strong or persistent enough, I will write a violation notice to the facility. Graphic Packaging has received 8 violation notices for odors in the past 10 years. We are also here because of community concerns about levels of hydrogen sulfide in the area. Hydrogen sulfide is a colorless gas with a strong odor of rotten eggs. It is produced naturally in the environment, but it can also come from various industrial processes like paper mills and wastewater treatment plants. Since we know that these types of processes can produce hydrogen sulfide, and because we know that hydrogen sulfide has a strong odor, we were interested in doing more research about hydrogen sulfide levels in the surrounding area. So what is EGLE doing to address these odors and citizens' concerns? Well, we continue to conduct air quality inspections at Graphic Packaging at least every other year, and we continue to respond to citizen complaints. Please don't hesitate to give me a call if you are experiencing strong odors where you live. In 2019, EGLE initiated escalated enforcement against graphic packaging because of 5 odor violations that occurred between February 2017 and May 2019. During our initial enforcement discussions with the company, Graphic Packaging agreed to conduct an odor study to assess odors coming from their facility. We then requested that Graphic Packaging submit an odor minimization plan after completion of that odor study. After the odor minimization plan was submitted to EGLE in December 2020, we requested many changes to that plan before we could approve it. Graphic Packaging then requests to conduct an engineering study to determine the best methods for reducing their odors. They conducted this engineering study and the results were sent to EGLE in September 2021 of this year. The results will be used to make changes to the odor minimization plan. And now that the engineering study is complete, EGLE will resume enforcement discussions with the company. The goal of enforcement action is to resolve any outstanding violations by entering into a legally binding agreement, which will penalize the company for past violations, require actions the company will take to maintain compliance, and set additional penalties if future non-compliance occurs. In addition to the enforcement actions EGLE has taken against Graphic Packaging, we have also conducted our own hydrogen sulfide monitoring for about a 6-week period in April and May of this year. We placed 2 of these monitors, which are called care pole monitors, downwind of both Graphic Packaging and the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant on Riverview Drive. You can see on this map here on this slide, the 2 red dots are where we put our 2 monitors. The south side one is the one right across from Graphic Packaging, and the north one is right across from the City of Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant. These monitors continue to collect continuous data during this time period. We'll discuss more about this data and what it means a little bit later in the presentation. EGLE has also been analyzing data from hydrogen sulfide sensors that have been placed on Graphic Packaging property, the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation property, and a few locations in the surrounding community. These sensors are called EnviroSuite hydrogen sulfide monitors. We are currently in the process of analyzing some of this data. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is also using this data to look at any potential health concerns in the surrounding community. We're also continuing to collaborate with the City of Kalamazoo, MDHHS, and the US EPA, and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry on these issues. Next, I want to talk about what Graphic Packaging has been doing to reduce odors. As we discussed a little bit in the previous slide, Graphic Packaging has installed 16 EnviroSuite hydrogen sulfide monitors on their property. These monitors continuously monitor and record hydrogen sulfide levels. In addition to installing these hydrogen sulfide monitors, Graphic Packaging has also made some modifications to their wastewater treatment system to reduce odors. They have used a couple of different chemical additives to their clarifier and wastewater treatment system over the past few years to help oxidize the water, which helps to reduce odors. Most recently, they have been using a combination of peroxide and an oxygen injection system in their wastewater treatment system. They have also increased their sludge removal from their sludge pile from 2 to 3 times per week to 5 to 6 times per week. This sludge contains the solids that are filtered from their water in their wastewater treatment process. As I previously said in the other slide, that they have conducted a third-party odor study, and that odor study was done by RK and Associates, and they submitted an odor minimization plan that after they conducted that third-party odor study. As part of their odor minimization plan, they're also doing quarterly monitoring of hydrogen sulfide at various locations in the plant using a handheld Jerome monitor to get more pinpointed hydrogen sulfide readings from specific processes within the plant. As I also previously stated, they conducted their engineering study and they completed that in September 2021. I also just wanted to mention that the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant, which is located just north of Graphic Packaging, has also voluntarily taken steps to reduce their odors. They have installed a total of 12 EnviroSuite hydrogen sulfide monitors. There are 6 on Kalamazoo water reclamation property and 6 in surrounding community locations. They have also installed some carbon scrubbers and used some chemical additives in some of their processes to reduce odors. They're also in the process of installing a biofilter that will reduce odors coming from inside sewer pipes. So now I just want to show you some maps. EGLE and our partner agencies have been conducting a variety of air sampling recently. You heard me talk about some of what we did already, but I think laying out the sampling collection points on a map may be helpful for those of you joining online. So this first map shows the locations of the care pole monitors that EGLE used to measure hydrogen sulfide in the outdoor air. We did this on Riverview Drive for about 6 weeks in April and May of this year. And this map shows the EnviroSuite monitors located on graphic packaging property. And you can kind of see the layout of these monitors here. This map shows the EnviroSuite monitors the City of Kalamazoo has installed in the area. The EnviroSuite monitors installed by GPI and the city continuously look for hydrogen sulfide in the air as well, but for a longer period of time than our care pole monitors. This data is being evaluated, but we will be talking about some of our initial determinations later on this evening. So you can see here that there are 6 within the community and 6 located on the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant property. The next few slides will show maps of some of the sampling EPA has done in the area with their mobile monitor, which is called the GMAP. By mobile, I'm talking about like a van or a truck with monitoring equipment following some specific paths and taking measurements. EPA will talk more in depth about this later, but let's take a look at their routes. This first map shows their scouting route in the area. Now we are looking at the route that they took around graphic packaging specifically. And this map is showing the community focused route that they took. So the community areas surrounding graphic packaging. And this map shows areas where EPA took some grab samples using a kind of sampling device called a SUMA canister when they were experiencing an odor plume, or areas where they could smell odors. And this last map is just to show all of these sampling locations overlaid on one another, so you can see the focus around graphic packaging and the wastewater treatment plant. All of this sampling has allowed us to get some good information about what is going on in the area and is one of the main reasons we wanted to meet with you tonight. As I said earlier, you will hear more detailed information about these sampling events later on, but I hope this gives you a good overview of some of the work we have been doing. Now I'll pass it off to Marta from EPA to discuss her role in the project.
Yeah, Marta, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on, and thanks a lot for that, Monica. I appreciate it. I think that does help definitely lay the groundwork. Marta's going to share her presentation here a minute and turn her camera on. But just, I know that we have a bunch of people calling in. And again, just, I know Monica's showing some maps. That is definitely something that we will be posting on the web. So if you are interested in some of the things that she's talked about, the odor study, the engineering report, which is very long, just to let you know, the odor minimization plan, all of that stuff is located on our graphic packaging website. So, and I'll mention this again, but I just want to put it out there now for any folks that have pencil and piece of paper and are writing this down. It's Michigan.gov/EGLEGraphicPackaging, and EGLE is EGLE graphic packaging, all one word. So those have all been posted on there. We did just get a couple of those things posted either early this morning or later last night. So just to let folks know that is on there if anybody wants to do a little bit of research. If you don't have internet access, you're calling in and you don't have internet access, again, just take Monica's number down at the end and we'll figure out a way to get you what you need. So Marta, without further ado, sorry about that. I just want to make sure that I was kind of following up on some of that, but you can go ahead and start your presentation whenever you're ready.
Yes, as soon as I unmute. Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening. I am Marta Fuoco. I'm a scientist in the Air Division in EPA's Region 5 office. Over the last 16 years, I've led many monitoring projects, collecting and analyzing data to respond to public concerns in areas such as Kalamazoo. I worked on developing and designing the mobile monitor that you see here in this picture that we used in this project. We call it our mobile monitor because we have outfitted a truck with some specialized equipment, and that lets us take frequent air samples as we drive around, and we can see the results in real time on a computer inside this vehicle. So because we've developed this unique expertise in monitoring for hydrogen sulfide, we are often called to evaluate situations where hydrogen sulfide is a potential concern. So just this summer, we've deployed our mobile monitor on 10 campaigns, including a situation where emergency orders were issued based on the monitoring and analysis that we conducted. And Kalamazoo was prioritized as one of these 10 sites because of the complaints and the concerns that we heard, and we wanted to evaluate further. Here in Kalamazoo, our main objective, as you heard already, was to look for hydrogen sulfide around graphic packaging and the wastewater treatment plant. But we also looked for a couple of additional pollutants, and those were methane, benzene, toluene, and p-xylene. So this mobile monitor, I've already said it's unique. It's one of a few of these concepts in the nation, and it's the only one that measures this combination of parameters. Our mobile monitor also measures wind speed and wind direction, and it takes a coordinated GPS reading for each measurement taken, so that every second we know what concentration is being measured out in the air, where the wind was coming from when that measurement was taken, how fast the wind was blowing, and the exact location where that reading was taken. And we're able to see this information in real time in the truck. And that lets us search and chase for plumes to get a better understanding of what we're seeing in the air. So for the 3 days that we spent monitoring in the field in Kalamazoo, we had very good monitoring conditions. The winds were blowing from the northeast over the facilities that we were interested in, allowing us in our monitoring vehicle to get very close to the fence line of the facilities that we were interested in. Our mobile monitoring equipment worked really well, and we were able to get out and monitor very early in the morning and very late in the evening, and that's when we would expect to see the highest concentrations of hydrogen sulfide. And we also monitored in between, so it wasn't just very early and just very late, but we managed to monitor at all times of the day. We took 1-second measurements, and that allowed us to take over 100,000 data points for over those 3 days. Most of the values were below reporting limits. We did see some background levels of methane, and we also observed odors in the field. But during those times, we did not measure any of the parameters that our instruments are capable of measuring. So Monica mentioned this earlier. We can also take canister samples in the field. And here on this slide, you see an example of a few of the types of canisters that we used. We take this additional canister sampling when we see in real time in the mobile monitor that we're measuring a pollutant. So if we measure one pollutant in the vehicle, or 2 pollutants, or a couple of pollutants using our mobile monitor, we know that we've entered a plume of air, that there may be additional pollutants as well. So that gives us a sign that this may be a good time to take an additional canister reading. Or if we smell odors or are observing something, but it's not reflected by the measurements that the mobile monitor is taking. So these canisters allow us to take this sample of air that we collect and take those canisters back to the laboratory for an additional comprehensive analysis. And this again lets us look for more compounds. These compounds that we can measure with these canisters are called VOCs, and they are emitted from certain industrial processes. So it's just another tool that we use to try to identify what is in the air. You briefly saw the monitoring routes that we drove when Monica described them just a little bit ago. I'm going to show these to you again, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found in more detail. So the mobile monitoring path driven in the Kalamazoo community downwind of graphic packaging is depicted by these blue lines. Graphic packaging is depicted by this star. And the path that was driven covered Mosul Avenue North to Northwest Hedge Avenue West to East Ranson Street South. The winds, again, were favorable for monitoring over those 3 days. Winds coming in from the northeast over graphic packaging and the wastewater treatment facility. And again, that allowed us to get very close downwind of the facility. Only low levels of methane were detected above the reporting limit. The mobile monitoring path driven around graphic packaging and the water reclamation facility is depicted again by the blue lines. This path covered Patterson Road south of graphic packaging from Park Street west to Riverview Drive east, Riverview Drive east of graphic packaging north to East Mosel Avenue and west to Pitcher Street, back down to Patterson Street. Again, wind conditions were favorable for monitoring over these 3 days, coming in from the northeast over graphic packaging and the wastewater treatment facility. Only low levels of methane were again detected above reporting limits. EPA also monitored outside the fence line of 4 additional facilities. And I want to point out here that the map in this case, in this slide, is oriented where east is facing up. The path here covered South Romance Road Parkway, north to Sprinkle Road, west to Kalamazoo Avenue, to Myrtle Street, and North Pitcher Street. The winds were blowing from the northwest. Low levels of methane were detected above the reporting limit. Several seconds of hydrogen sulfide data above the reporting limit near Sprinkle Road and Park Circle Drive were measured. However, the magnitude and duration of these concentrations were low and not sustained, and therefore not significant. EPA also, as Monica mentioned, collected 8 canisters. Those canisters were analyzed by the EGLE laboratory. Some of the canister samples were taken when the staff running the mobile monitor were observing odors. And here in this slide, you will see which canisters were observed during odors. Those are denoted by the asterisks next to them. The stars represent the location of the canisters, and also you can see if they were grab samples, so a very short grab of air, or longer term composite samples. So the canisters were set so that they could draw in a certain number of hours of air, and then that composite sample was taken to the laboratory. I'll point out that all of these locations are downwind of graphic packaging in the wastewater treatment plant. Low levels above the reporting limit were identified for 5 VOCs, but these reported levels were well below health thresholds. And in addition to the standard analysis, the EGLE laboratory ran additional tests to see if other compounds could be identified. They were not able to identify any additional compounds out of these canisters. We compare the mobile monitoring data that we collect to certain health benchmarks, such as the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry's minimum risk levels that you see here in this table. The mobile monitor can detect levels below these values. In some cases, the reporting limits of our instruments are higher than these health benchmarks, such as with benzene. In these instances, it's especially useful to collect these canisters because they can not only identify additional pollutants, but they also provide lower reporting limits that can add additional information to our studies. You've heard me say on several occasions that low levels of methane were measured. I'd like to point out that methane does not have a health benchmark. It's considered biologically inert at these low concentrations. Over the 3 days of this monitoring campaign, odors were observed by EPA field staff each day downwind of graphic packaging and the wastewater treatment plant. Although a distinct odor was observed downwind of these facilities, EPA did not detect reportable concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, benzene, toluene, or p-xylene using the mobile monitor during these 3 days. Methane was detected at background levels. The canister analysis measured for additional VOCs that could be a concern and could potentially contribute to these odors. These additional canister samples that were taken during the odor events and when odors were not present were sent to the laboratory. They identified 5 compounds, but all the concentrations were well below levels of health concern. It is possible that the odors are not caused by the pollutants that we could measure by the mobile monitor or the canisters, or that they're present at such low concentrations that they're below detectable thresholds. EPA has not been able to identify the odors that the field staff encountered during this monitoring campaign. And so we continue to support Michigan EGLE and the Region 5 EJ program on air quality monitoring and evaluation in this area.
Thanks a lot for that, Marta. I appreciate you going through the GMAP stuff. I think learning about how this mobile monitor works is pretty interesting. Marta and her team did a nice evaluation of this, and the report is posted on that graphic packaging website. So again, that is Michigan.gov, and it's /EGLE, EGLE, the word graphic packaging. So EGLE graphic packaging is all one word. So that did get posted on there this morning as well. So thanks a lot, Marta. I really appreciate you going over all of that. I think we'll probably have some questions for you as we get on into the night. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually transfer it over to Keisha Williams, our EGLE toxicologist. So Keisha, if you want to get ready to go ahead and share your screen, I know you have a presentation. We're going to be shifting a little bit over to some of the health evaluation that went on with a lot of these studies. So we gave you a lot of details on a lot of studies. I know that was a lot of information to throw at people. And so definitely feel free to take your time in kind of absorbing that. If you have questions about the things that we've talked about so far, please feel free to go ahead and put those in your Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you wanted to, that's up to you. So Keisha, I see your screen. That looks great. If you want to go ahead with your part of the presentation, you can do so at any time.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, I'm Keisha, and I get to work with the Air Toxics Unit with the Air Quality Division. And as Jennifer pointed out, I'm a toxicologist. I'll talk about the air quality results that were observed with hydrogen sulfide, and that's related to the sampling that EGLE did in April and May of this year. And we'll talk about how these results relate to health. There are a few different ways to estimate if air quality might affect people's health. One of my roles is to look at air quality results from air monitoring efforts and compare those results to health comparison values. These comparisons are one of the ways to estimate health risk from monitored air quality. And so I'll again be specifically going over the monitoring that EGLE did related to hydrogen sulfide this past April and May. These health comparison values or health benchmarks, as Marta mentioned as well, are developed from research studies and set at levels that are not expected to cause a health concern over a specific time frame. It's important to note that they're also set at levels where they're protective of the general public, including sensitive groups like asthmatics. Health comparison values are often developed to relate to two main health effects: the risk of developing cancer or the risk of having a non-cancer effect. For hydrogen sulfide specifically, the health comparison values are for non-cancer effects. And this is because research studies have not shown that hydrogen sulfide causes cancer. There are two short-term health comparison values that were used to compare the compared to the hydrogen sulfide air monitoring results. The results were below both of those health comparison values, so they are not expected to be a short-term health concern. But going more into this is the first graph, and I'll try to explain it, especially for those on the phone, so that we all have an idea of what the results show. On the left side of the graph, it shows the results on a scale from 0 to 80. At the bottom of the graph, it shows the sampling days or the monitoring days. There is a blue line representing the results from the north side, specifically for the daily averages that are seen with the hydrogen sulfide results. And this is again for the north side that's on Riverview Drive, excuse me. There's a green line that represents the average daily results for hydrogen sulfide from the south side on Riverview Drive. There is a dashed line that shows the health comparison value for the time frame of 1 day to 14 days of exposure with being exposed to hydrogen sulfide. And what you'll see is that as compared to the health comparison value for that time frame, the sampling results at those two sites are well below that health comparison value. Going more into that health comparison value is based off of a research study where the more sensitive effects were respiratory problems as well as nervous system problems, and nervous system problems being those like headaches. The other health comparison value timeframe that was used for this specific 6-week sampling period is from more than 14 days, but less than a full year, so less than 365 days. And going more into that graph, into the next graph, which shows the average of hydrogen sulfide results over the entire 6-week period, we see again on the left side of the graph that the results are shown on a scale from 0 to 25. At the bottom of the graph are the two sites, the north side in blue, and then the south side with a bar in green. And again, we have the dashed line for the health comparison value for this new time frame of more than 14 days, but less than a full year. This health comparison value is based off of a research study where the most sensitive effect was respiratory problems. And again, the health comparison value is set at a level where those effects are not expected to be seen. There are important limitations to consider as we're talking about the results, what they say about health, but also what they're not able to tell us. And more specifically, looking at these short-term exposures does not allow us to answer a lot of questions about long-term exposures and what people might be experiencing. Also, there would need to be more analysis to make other statements about how these exposures might be affecting other vulnerable groups. If these shorter time frame results are the same over the long term, the hydrogen sulfide results would be above long-term health comparison values. Again, we weren't able to show that with this shorter time frame, but that's a consideration that might be made. Along with that, though, it's important to consider and to keep in mind that exceeding health comparison values is cause for further review. It does not necessarily mean that health problems would occur as a result of the air quality that's shown with these monitoring results. That further review is being done by the state health department, by the colleagues there, and they're helping us to understand the long-term health concerns as well as health concerns for vulnerable groups. Thank you. Oh. Thank you, sorry. In summary, sorry about that. In summary, the Air Quality Division conducted air monitoring for hydrogen sulfide downwind of major suspected sources. Comparing to health comparison values, the hydrogen sulfide results are not expected to be a health concern over the short term, but we are keeping in mind that this is just a snapshot of time when thinking about long-term exposures and what might be happening there. Lastly, the evaluation of health concerns for these long-term exposures, as well as for other factors, is still being investigated. With that, thank you.
Oh, that's no problem. I knew you had one more slide, but I thought, oh, maybe she took that out and I just didn't remember. So yeah, I really appreciate you going through that. We've gotten just a couple of comments in the question box. And Brandon, if you want to get ready to share your slides, go ahead. But just involving, we're talking about all these different kinds of studies that have been going on. And one of the thoughts that someone had evoked was we're looking at some of these short-term studies, but then we also have these more longer-term studies that have been going on with the EnviroSuite data that Graphic Packaging is doing and that the wastewater treatment plant is doing. And does that give us a fuller picture? And, absolutely, it takes all of these different studies to really give us a full picture. And that's kind of why we're talking about this tonight. And Brandon, just so you know, you got to put it in presentation mode there, and then you should be ready to go. So we do have, that is painting us a bigger picture. Those EnviroSuite monitors are measuring for longer periods of time. So I think that's going to be really helpful for us to kind of look at this holistically and really be able to come out with some strong determinations. But in the interim, I am glad that Keisha was able to at least share some of that short-term data. It's good to know that there's not a short-term health effect concern right now. And I personally didn't know this, and I promise, Brandon, I'll stop talking in a second here, but I personally did not know that, we didn't have cancer concerns from hydrogen sulfide. So that was nice to hear as well. So appreciate you giving that presentation, Keisha. I'm going to stop chatting and send it over to Brandon. Brandon, if you can just reintroduce yourself and Bill, because it's been a little while since I did that, that'd be really helpful as well.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think you should be good. Yeah.
Great. Again, my name is Brandon Reed. I'm a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I'll be giving the community update from the MDHHS side of things. Okay, as a general overview for today's presentation, I wanted to share that we at MDHHS are preparing a health consultation to evaluate potential health concerns related to hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals in the community near the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant and the Kalamazoo Graphic Packaging International Facility. Basically, a health consultation is a report that shares the findings of a public health assessment, which is what we're currently in the process of doing for this area. The goal of our public health assessment is to answer a specific question, which is, do chemicals in the air around these facilities pose a public health concern? In order to answer this question, we evaluate the environmental data, and that gives us an idea about the levels of chemicals in the air. Once we complete our assessment, we'll make recommendations based on our conclusions. Throughout our assessment, we've been supported by the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, and our methods follow their guidance. In addition to our partners at ATSDR, EGLE, and EPA, we're also working with MDHHS epidemiologists to investigate asthma rates in the community around KWRP and graphic packaging. And I'll talk more about that investigation later on. So as you've heard already, the primary chemical that we're focusing on is hydrogen sulfide, also known as H2S. Keisha already talked about hydrogen sulfide a bit, but I wanted to briefly go over the important information to know about this chemical. So hydrogen sulfide, it's a clear colorless gas with a characteristic rotten egg odor that can be smelled at very low levels in the air, well below levels that are known to cause adverse or harmful health effects. If you breathe high amounts of hydrogen sulfide, it may cause eye, nose, or throat irritation, as well as headaches and tiredness. H2S is not known to cause asthma, but it can make it hard to breathe for people who do have asthma. And importantly, as has already been said, there's no evidence that breathing H2S can cause cancer. In addition to hydrogen sulfide, we're also investigating levels of reduced sulfur compounds, volatile organic compounds, and ammonia in the air. These chemicals have odors similar to hydrogen sulfide and can also cause health effects if levels are high enough in the air. So next, I want to go over the data that we'll be using in our health assessment. Some of these studies have already been talked about today, but there are a couple that we haven't talked about yet. And each of these studies that I'm going to talk about measured chemicals in the air at various locations in the community surrounding the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant and Graphic Packaging. So the first study is Graphic Packaging's odor monitoring study completed in 2020 by an independent contractor that was hired by Graphic Packaging. The study used handheld monitors to measure hydrogen sulfide in the air for about a minute at a time. So it kind of gave a little snapshot of what was going on in the air at that time, and they completed those once a day. Next is the City of Kalamazoo's monitoring study, which was also completed in 2020. This was by an independent contractor hired by the City of Kalamazoo. And that study measured not just hydrogen sulfide, but also reduced sulfur compounds, volatile organic compounds, and ammonia. And those instruments that were used collected samples for up to 24 hours, 3 separate days. So the next 3 studies have already been discussed, but I'll go over them again briefly. The EPA completed mobile monitoring using their GMET vehicle in May of 2021, which monitored hydrogen sulfide and some organic compound levels. EGLE monitored hydrogen sulfide levels using its CarePulse sensors over 6 weeks in April and May of 2021. And lastly, the City of Kalamazoo and Graphic Packaging have maintained their EnviroSuite sensors on their facilities, which constantly monitor hydrogen sulfide levels. The city also maintains 6 sensors in community locations throughout Kalamazoo, some of which have been running since 2019. So these community sensors have been really helpful as because they've been running so long, they can show long-term changes in hydrogen sulfide levels in the community. And as you can see with the other data that's been collected, we're not getting that much data from any of the other studies that were completed. But as you can see, there's a lot of data available that we're in the process of evaluating. So it's taken us a while to get through that and make sure that we evaluate it in a comprehensive and careful approach. So moving on to the next step, once we receive our data, it's compared to health comparison values. And Keisha talked about this a lot already, but just as a reminder, health comparison values represent the level of chemicals in the air that may cause a concern for health effects. I do want to know, as Keisha already did, that chemical levels that rise above a health comparison value are not guaranteed to cause harmful health effects. Instead, they act as sort of a threshold. They help us decide on our next steps, which may include consulting with stakeholders in the community and partner agencies, or performing a more detailed investigation and additional monitoring. Health comparison values are set by public health agencies like ATSDR and EPA. They're chemical specific, meaning each chemical has its own health comparison value based on its specific effects, and they're based on toxicology and epidemiology studies for those chemicals. Our comparison of chemical data to health comparison values is an important part of our health consultation, but it is not the only part of the assessment. So in addition to strictly comparing chemical levels to health comparison values, we're also going to be investigating asthma prevalence in the community near the Kalamazoo Water Reclamation Plant and Graphic Packaging. We know many community members are concerned about asthma, and while we know that hydrogen sulfide doesn't cause asthma, we know that people with asthma may be more sensitive or susceptible to hydrogen sulfide in the air. So they may experience worse symptoms or effects when they breathe hydrogen sulfide compared to people who do not have asthma. And with the help of our epidemiologists from MDHHS, we're hoping to learn more about the rates of asthma in the community surrounding graphic packaging and the water treatment plant. And we'll share those findings in our health consultation. We'll also be considering the impact of odors caused by chemicals in the air. So as we talked about a lot, hydrogen sulfide has a very strong odor that can be smelled at very low levels in the air. We know that foul odors worsen quality of life. It's uncomfortable to live near them. They can cause headaches. They can discourage you from going outdoors or walking or exercising. And even though these odors by themselves may not cause specific health effects, we know that they can still affect people's overall well-being. So that's important to us as well, that we consider that. And in addition, we'll be looking at stress and how the levels of chemicals in the air contribute to personal stress. We know that foul odors, adverse health effects, and even just the fear of getting sick from an exposure can cause stress. And we know that constant increased stress levels can cause adverse health effects like elevated blood pressure and increased heart rate. We've heard from several community members in Kalamazoo about the stress they felt over the past years related to the odors in their communities. So we're also committed to considering stress as part of our health consultation. And that is it for me. So thank you for being here and for listening in, and please don't hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns.
Thank you very much, Brandon. We will put Brandon's email address back on the screen in a minute, but just if anybody wanted to jot it down really quickly, I'll just leave it up there for a second. And I will read it out for our phone-in folks just because if anybody has to jump off early. So his email address is R as in red, E as in elephant, I as in igloo, D as in dog, B as in boy, and then the number 1. So read B1, and it's at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. So we are getting some interesting questions in the question box. So I appreciate folks doing that. I want to go over a couple of things just to talk about really quickly. And if my panelists want to go ahead and turn their cameras back on and get ready for that, that would be great. So a couple of things, Brandon mentioned the health consultation a few times, and I wanted to just let folks know that if you are on this meeting tonight, or if we have any subsequent meetings, or if you attended any of the permit meetings in the past, you will be notified when that health consultation is ready to be viewed. We'll share that via email. We'll also post it online, and we will most likely also do a release through our email delivery system that goes to folks interested in air quality issues and or environmental justice issues in the state. So just want to let folks know when that is ready. We will be broadcasting a wide net to let you all know that it's available for viewing. So that was just definitely one thing. Anything else that we are doing evaluations on or writing reports or anything like that will be posted on that website that I mentioned earlier. And I will say it again in a couple minutes here just to make sure that everybody's heard it at least 3 times, because that is definitely the fastest way most times to get information that we have available for you. If anyone is looking at that website and saying, I can't find something, or I don't know how this works, or this is confusing, please feel free to reach out to Monica or even myself, and we're more than happy to walk you through that. All right, so we do have some questions in the question box. I want to make sure that we get to those. And just to let folks know, if I know you guys are typing stuff in, so you might not know that somebody's asked a similar question. I might not read your question verbatim, but I want to make sure that we get to the gist of the questions, that we get your questions answered, and we do that to the best of our ability tonight. So if you want to type your questions in the question box, that would be great. If you are really feeling strongly about asking your question verbally, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand icon, or if you're on the phone and you want to ask a question, that is #2 on your phone. So just going through our panelists here again, I want to just remind everybody of who we heard from tonight. So we did hear from Monica first. She is the inspector again for this area. She talked a lot about the background and kind of set the stage for a lot of the air studies that we've been doing. Keisha talked about that care pool study. So that was those 2 sites on Riverview Drive. And we did have a question on citing those monitors and why we picked that location. So panelists kind of be thinking about that. I think, Monica, you might know some of the answers to that citing question. Then we've got Bill Farrell. You didn't hear from him yet, but he is with our Department of Health and Human Services, and he's going to be on the panel with Brandon, who you just heard from. We heard from Marta from US EPA. She talked about that mobile monitoring. And Marta, just to kind of cue you, we also had a question about whether or not graphic packaging was notified to your sampling. So we'll get to that question in a minute, but I just wanted to let you know that that did come in as well. And then we did have Jason Wolf here. He can talk a little bit about our enforcement process. I know we had a question about that. How does that whole process work? Why are, fines not been assessed yet? So he can talk a little bit about, where we are in the process. Monica talked about that earlier, but he can talk a little bit more about how enforcement work. Enforcement is sometimes one of the more frustrating things that we get to deal with here at EGLE, because it does sometimes take a very, very long time to get sort of to the end of that. So, but hopefully you heard about the progress that is being made. I think ultimately getting odors reduced or taken care of, getting improvements to quality of life is one of the more important things going on in the community. So again, really appreciate folks that have stayed on with us tonight. I know this has been a long meeting. I know we're throwing a lot at you right now. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that I can understand that that can be sometimes frustrating for folks. Okay, so Marta, since I queued you up there, I'm going to throw that question to you first. Did you, and it's okay to say you don't know if you don't know, but and if somebody else knows, please feel free to chime in as well. But do you know if graphic packaging, did we let them know when you guys were going to be out doing the mobile monitoring, or was that something that we did at whatever date was convenient for you guys?
The way we selected the date for graphic packaging was based on meteorology. We wanted to make sure that we were maximizing, we wanted optimal monitoring conditions. So we wanted the winds coming out of the right direction, that we needed to get up to the fence line as close as possible. I don't know, I don't recall. I would have to look to see if we notified through enforcement graphic packaging when we did go out.
Okay. No, that's great. And we can find that out for sure if folks really want to know. But I think that I appreciate that you mentioned the meteorology, because that is probably the most important thing when it comes to doing sampling. I know the focus for you and the focus for us and any of this monitoring was finding kind of like what we might consider that worst case, so that we could see what the highest numbers might end up being. And then, because that gives us a better assessment of things, we don't want to look at what the best case scenario is in these sampling events. We want to look at the worst case. So Monica, I don't know if you know this, I know that you helped with the care pool sampling. So can you talk a little bit about why you guys chose those two locations on Riverview? The question really was about, why didn't we pick something on the west side of the facility as well, just to kind of see those two sides of things. So I don't know if you can address that a little bit.
Yeah, the reason we chose to place them east of those facilities is because the prevailing winds are typically from the west going east. So we figured we would have a better chance at catching any odor plumes in the area. When I've gotten odor complaints that I've been able to verify and send violation notices to the company for, it's usually been along Riverview Drive or near Borges or the cemetery that's right over there on Riverview. So that's why we chose that area.
Okay, thank you for that. And this is another sort of monitoring, how does pollution work question. So Marta, I'm going to put this one to you just because I know you guys did a little bit more of that mobile monitoring in the area. So the question is, methane and H2S, because they're heavy and the neighborhoods around the facilities are sort of in a valley, would we expect for some of that pollution to sometimes be trapped down more in the breathing zone, or is that not what we would be expecting?
So you're right, Jennifer, hydrogen sulfide is a heavy gas. And so we do, when we're looking when we're looking at areas when we monitor, we will typically head towards areas that maybe are lower in elevation. The heavy gas settles. It's also the reason that when we go out to monitor, we monitor very early in the morning and very late at night so when the wind conditions are still, so that we have the best chance of measuring the concentrations if they are there. So yes, so hydrogen sulfide is a heavy gas. It does settle, and we do tend to find it in areas of lowered elevation.
Yeah, I think that I was thinking that one might be the case based on what you talked about, but it's definitely good to sort of reiterate that. And again, that goes to those worst case scenarios. Keisha, I'm going to put this one to you, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to address it thoroughly, but I know that you and I did have at least a little bit of discussion on this. So the question is about EJ screen. And I know you're not our EJ advocate, but because of some of the work you do, I know we've looked at this. And the question is about the Northside score for respiratory disease and cancer being at 91%. So I know it says percent, but I think it's percentile, and maybe talk a little bit about what that means if you can. And if, again, I know this, we don't necessarily have an EJ expert on our panel right now, so we might have to get back to this question, but if you have any insight, I'd appreciate you providing it.
Yeah, this is a really important question. EPA's EJ screen is a really helpful screening tool for thinking about where additional efforts and where additional consideration needs to be made, especially related to environmental justice. And so with that, the score or the indexes are made up of different parts. When we're talking about the EJ score or the EJ index, it's made up of demographic indicators like the amount of folks in the area that are minorities or that are low income. And it also matches that up with an environmental indicator. So something like ozone, the level of ozone in the area, the proximity that folks live close to traffic, and other environmental indicators. And it matches those up to get an EJ index. And so we can't correlate it directly to something like the chance of getting cancer or the chance of getting asthma, but it does help us to then look more into environmental indicators, more into demographic indicators, and it tells us when we have a high score like that, we need to look more into why it is. And also we need to think about what additional efforts need to be made. So things like outreach, things like, is there an environmental quality issue here? We need to look further and make that determination. And with that, it doesn't include everything. So one of the environmental indicators, for example, is using the National Air Toxics Assessment, and it gives us an idea of cumulative respiratory risk. So for a number of pollutants, looking at them in such a way that we're thinking about if they all affect the lung, what is that combined risk, which is really helpful. But as we're thinking about that, although that includes a lot of pollutants, one of the pollutants that it doesn't include is hydrogen sulfide. So it doesn't tell us everything, but it does give us a good idea of where we need to put more effort into looking if there's an environmental justice issue.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's definitely one of those things, especially being that the national air toxics data doesn't include the H2S factor. I think that was really what lent itself to us doing all of these studies so that we could get that bigger picture look. There was a question in the chat as well about, you know, what specific things are we doing to address these EJ issues that we've talked about? And doing all of these studies in such a comprehensive way is definitely one of the actions that we can take. It's one of the actions that, you know, our rules allow us to take. Keisha, looking at some of these things outside and engaging with our health experts on what does this information mean to us is definitely something that we can do in response to some of the environmental justice concerns. So I know, again, that's not something that's necessarily comprehensively providing relief to the community, but it's something that we at least hope to help, that helps inform community members on actions that they might be able to take or other ways that we can engage with folks on getting questions that we can answered. Switching gears a little bit from EJ, Jason, I want to just put this to you now, just to kind of talk a little bit, if you can go through So Monica sort of set the stage with the violation notices that she's issued to graphic packaging based on odors. We talked about, and I would like you to reiterate the time frame when we escalated enforcement, because I can't remember, and I apologize. My brain didn't remember that date. But I know that after we did that, we did have some steps that have happened. But if you can talk a little bit just about the enforcement process in general, I think that would be really helpful for people.
Okay, so we started enforcement with the first enforcement notice in July of 2019. It's challenging with 901 cases or nuisance odor cases, when to escalate a case for enforcement. But at that point, we had 5 violation notices over a period of approximately 2 years. So decision made to escalate at that point. And what we try to do is reach a voluntary agreement with the company to try to resolve the violations. The other challenging aspect of 901 cases is there's often, real difficulty for the staff and for the company to identify the source of the odors. And then also when there's multiple facilities that could be contributed to odor sources as well, which is why, at least initially, we began with the odor study that they completed over last year.
Thank you for that. I know sometimes enforcement can, like I said earlier, be frustrating for us as well, because it definitely is something that can take a while. Is there, and just because I'm not remembering appropriately on this, but is there a public participation process sometimes in these, but not always in enforcement? So there's sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
do a public
if
comment and
we- if
sometimes
we
not, right?
If we are able to reach an administrative consent order agreement with the
Yeah.
company, which at this point I anticipate, but I cannot guarantee, there will be a public participation and a public hearing with opportunity for comment.
So that's one of those things too, where we'll definitely be reaching out to folks that attended this meeting, that attended previous meetings, to let you know that there's another opportunity to engage with us on that as well. So thank you for that, Jason. I do really appreciate it. Monica, this one's going to go to you. So I know part of what we were talking about with the enforcement is the engineering study that was just completed. We just got it really recently. We just put it online. We're still evaluating that. And I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how we're engaging with our other EGLE staff on that evaluation. And I don't even know if you have any idea on when we might be making some sort of a final evaluation on that or anything. But if you can just talk a little bit more about that. I know there's definitely folks that are interested in what sort of actionable items may be coming out of that.
Sure. The engineering study, at the end of the study, there kind of gave 6 or 7 things that they thought could be useful in mitigating odors at graphic packaging. So during the enforcement process with graphic packaging, we are currently discussing those different options with them and seeing what's feasible for them to do and implement. We haven't come to any conclusions about that, but that will certainly be part of our enforcement discussions. And whatever we decide on will be put in their odor minimization plan. And it will become enforceable in that way.
So and maybe I missed you saying this, but I know we are engaging with one of our EGLE Water Resources Division.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We have talked with some folks in the water division, just because we are not the wastewater treatment plant experts and wanted to get their take on the engineering study. So we are working with them and making sure that we fully understand the engineering study from that perspective as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know it's a lengthy study. I looked at it yesterday and it's almost 700 pages, the entire thing. So there's a lot of data. There's also, if folks are interested in looking at that, again, that is on our website. It's just the study itself. There's not, we haven't finished our evaluation, so there's none of that yet, but there are some conclusions that were drawn by the folks that did the study that could potentially just help inform what's been going on. So this is a really good question. And we did talk a little bit about this. I know Marta talked about some other chemicals that they were looking for during the GMAP study. Brandon also just mentioned some of these as well. But the question is, we talked a lot about H2S during the presentation, but the question was that, you know, there are other chemicals that might be in the air, and H2S is obviously one of the more easily detected chemicals by the odor monitoring equipment. So is there anything else that folks should be concerned about from a respiratory issue standpoint that we saw? So Keisha, I'm gonna pass it to you first, and then if you have any insight that you can provide, and then if Brandon has anything that he wants to add on to that, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, that's a really important question. There are pollutants that we may not smell, for example, that may affect the lungs or another organ or another part of the body that we should be mindful of. The focus was mostly on hydrogen sulfide, especially for the EGLE sampling. That being said, some of the other pollutants that we consider, especially in an urban area in general, are things like ozone and PM 2.5. And we have, or particulate matter that's of a certain size. And we think about that as roughly really, really small dust. And with those, we do have monitoring in the area that's near real time. And so folks can even sometimes sign up for updates through our notification system to find out about air quality. And those in particular can affect someone's asthma and how they breathe.
Brandon, did you want to add anything on to that?
Just very briefly, which was that I did mention during the chemical slide and during my presentation, there are other chemicals that were monitored during this study. In addition to hydrogen sulfide, there was reduced sulfur compounds and volatile organic compounds. And those are also chemicals that we're evaluating. They aren't the primary focus, but we are, giving them the same evaluation, the same treatment as hydrogen sulfide in our health consultation. So we will also be looking at those.
Okay, thank you. There was a question in here about trees and graphic packaging cutting down trees. So that wouldn't be something that we would have given permission for or that we would have done. But the point was made in the comment is that trees do help reduce air pollution and potentially take care of odors as well. So, but I know the person who asked the question, you might want to reach out to the city. I don't know if it's on graphic packaging's property. That might not be something that even the city would have control over. So I apologize. We can't directly answer that question for you. So this again is going to go to Keisha and Brandon, but Keisha, because I know you showed those graphs with the health comparison values. The question was, what is the long-term H2S health comparison value that you're comparing to? We looked at the shorter term ones, but not necessarily the long-term ones. So, and I'm not sure if you're the best person. So if you aren't, then please just go ahead and pass it to Brandon for me.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are there are multiple health comparison values that are designed to be protective of public health, including sensitive groups like asthmatics. Two of the primary that we look at, one is from the EPA. So there is a chronic health comparison value from the EPA. And that value is 1.4 parts per billion. And that might be as compared to the really short term one that we described, or that I described in the presentation, at 70 parts per billion. So that's the difference there. That being said, there's also, that was also adopted by our air toxics unit and modified so that we could use it within our air permitting process. And so that's a long-term health comparison value.
Brandon, anything to add on that, or did Keisha cover it pretty well?
Yeah, just to briefly add on to that. So the EPA reference concentration that Keisha mentioned, the 1.4, that's one that we will be using in our health consultation. And that value, just to let everyone knows, that's it's a lifetime concentration value. So that represents exposures to that chemical over a lifetime, as opposed to the acute that Keisha mentioned of 70, that that applies to short-term exposures over up to 14 days. And then there's another intermediate MRL, minimum risk level, that's established by HSDR, that's 20 parts per billion, and that would be exposures up to a year. And then HSDR doesn't have a chronic MRL, which would apply to exposures over 1 year. So for those exposures over 1 year, we would defer to the EPA reference concentration.
So there's a lot of different ones, which can make it confusing, I think. So maybe as a side note for our panelists, as we get ready to kind of close out some of our evaluations, maybe that's something that we really need to make sure that we're detailing out, just because with so many, it is hard to, I'm picturing Keisha's presentation in my head with the 14 days and just trying to kind of go back to that. So just as a side reference for us panelists, I think we need to make sure we definitely lay those out really, really well. Brandon, don't go anywhere, because this question is going to be for you. And I don't know if you can address this or not, but I think it is important. A question came in about infant mortality. Is that something that the health consultation will also look at? I didn't hear you mention it, so I don't know if we would be doing that, looking at something like that as part of this health consultation, or if there's other reference information that we could point folks to, or if you have any insight on that, and if you don't, maybe Bill does.
Yeah, and it's a really good question. That's not part of the health consultation at this time. Yeah, I guess I would ask Bill if he has anything to add to that. But as from what we know about hydrogen sulfide in particular, it is not something that is a developmental toxicant. So it's not a chemical that interferes with people's ability to give birth to healthy babies. Yeah, I guess that's all I can really say about that right now. Bill, is there anything else?
Yeah,
that
no, that's right, Brandon. I mean, at this point, our letter health consultation, we aren't looking at that specific issue. Yeah, that's.
Well, and this is a follow-up, not necessarily to the infant mortality question. That's a great question. And so, maybe if you can find anything else out, Bill, we can always share that information down the road for sure. But this question goes to some of your activities there at the Department of Health and Human Services. The question is, are you guys planning to do any kind of door-to-door health survey, especially in some of the zip codes around this area? And I know that you've done that in previous situations. So the questioner just was wondering, the asker, I don't know what the right terminology is. The person is asking if you guys are planning on doing any of that.
At this point, right now, we don't have any plans to do that. We're going to do this, continue finishing up this letter health consultation, and in it we'll have our recommendations, and based on our recommendations, we'll see what the next steps are. But right now, we don't have any plans to do a door-to-door survey.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad to hear that the health consultation will include potentially some next steps, so folks will know what might be coming down the pipe there. Monica, this question is going to be for you, but I might help you answer it as well, or at least try to kind of set the stage a little bit, because I know we were at this previous air quality meeting together. So the question is, why did Graphic Packaging get to continue to expand when they were in violation, when they had started construction without a permit previously? So this went back to a public meeting we had on the most recent proposed permit. And I want to say that was in 2019, I think. So it was a couple of years ago. But the company did get a violation notice for starting construction without the permit. So I don't know if you can talk just a little bit about the process that we went through to get there, and maybe a little bit about that violation notice, if you don't mind.
Sure. They initially got a permit for their expansion and putting in their new paper machine, and that included a large boiler. And they got that permit, but then they changed their mind and wanted 2 small boilers instead of the larger boiler. So that was related to the violation notice, where that second permit to change to the 2 smaller boilers hadn't been approved yet before they had put the footings in for those other 2 boilers. So they kind of went ahead with construction. And so we sent them a violation notice for that, but that's not really a type of violation that we would consider in denying a permit.
So that's a good question. And there's a little bit of a follow-up to that is about, how was there something that was missed in the permit originally? So the 2 permit actions that we have gone out to comment for recently within the last few years that Graphic Packaging has requested. So the way it works, I'm going to give you a very high level talk on air permitting. So a company needs to make a change. They want to modify equipment. They want to install new equipment. They want to build a new facility. Any of those kinds of things could be the start of needing an air permit from us. If they emit air contaminants into the air, then they have to evaluate whether or not a permit is needed. Then they have to submit an application asking for what equipment they want to install, what they think their emissions are going to be, things like that. So we take their application, we evaluate it based on what they've given us. And in this case, like Monica said, they kind of changed their mind on the process that they wanted to use. And so that meant we had to go back in and reevaluate it. So it wasn't necessarily that something was missed in the permit review process. It was more of a, hey, whoops, we thought we wanted that, but we really wanted this. And then they just started constructing before they were really allowed to. The violations that they've gotten aren't a matter of missing things in the permit. What they are a matter of is, especially with Rule 901 and odors, because that is a nuisance rule where Monica really has to go out and do a lot of evaluation on site, make sure that she's smelling what y'all are smelling. When you give her a call and say, hey, it stinks out here, it smells like rotten eggs, or it's really bothering me. It's a little bit different. So even though we understand that some of the processes from the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant, from Graphic Packaging, might generate some of these odors, we do our best in the permitting process to make sure that we're putting as much kind of stops on that as we possibly can. But though we still not allow for those violations, but we have Rule 901 for those very reasons. So if things are wonky in your neighborhood, if you're smelling things that are bothering you, you can give Monica a call and she can get out there and evaluate what you're smelling. So they kind of maybe are parallel things, but they're not necessarily connected when it comes to permitting and whether or not an odor violation would be issued. So it's a really good question. So we do have somebody with their hand up. So hold on one second, Randy. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask a question to our panelists here. Hold on one second. You should be good to go. Go ahead and try to talk if you don't mind. And if you don't,
hello everyone.
Sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Introducing yourself. Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
This is Brandy Crawford Johnson. You guys all know me. I've met with everyone pretty much on this panel quite a few times. I just have a few questions. I do appreciate you guys listening to my concerns since I brought them up to you last summer when I started getting burning eyes, which was a new symptom. So I did have questions about the burning eyes, why everyone gets them, including our mailman. Like, what could that be related to? That was one question. And you guys got the toxicology report for the EPA partner that I asked to do a toxicology report, and it came through last December. So I sent it to the EPA and MDHHS and EGLE. And in his report, he said there was a severe risk to the community and the employees at Graphic Packaging and the wastewater plant. And I'm wondering if, because the hydrogen sulfide levels he found on the 2 odor studies that Kalamazoo did, the hydrogen sulfide levels were 4 or 5 times the minimal risk level. And then there was also methyl mercaptan, which I didn't see was one of the chemicals that were monitored. Do you think that because those studies, one was done in 2009 and one was it came out in 2020, but I think it was 2019. Do you think that the protocols that graphic packaging and the wastewater plant are putting in to reduce hydrogen sulfide is the reason why when you guys came out to monitor the air quality, that those hydrogen sulfides levels were a lot lower?
So, okay, I'm going to just stop you just for a second, Brandy. You asked a question, the first question. Can you go back to the first question first and let's look at that one and then we can talk about your second question. Do you mind reiterating that first one?
The one about the toxicology report?
No, what did you have one about your mailman?
Oh yeah, the burning
down.
eyes.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, burning eyes. Okay, so all right.
So,
I'm
so
so
what got
sorry.
me on this whole and got me interested in environmental justice and everything is that I was getting burning eyes, which was a new symptom. So I went door to door, and I think Monica talked to the reporter too, and she said like it was a zoning issue and that, you know, the gases get trapped there. So that could be a reason why we're having like asthma symptoms and burning eyes. But even our mailman, he doesn't live there, and he said that whenever it rains that he gets burning eyes, so he thinks there's acid rain. So my question is, what could be the cause of the burning eyes? Like what chemical? Would it be the methane? Would it be the hydrogen sulfide?
Okay, sure. All right, that's where I thought you were going with it, and I just wanted to make sure that I had gotten that right. So that was one thing that we didn't address. So Keisha and Brandon, I'm putting this one to you guys. Is there something that we've ever looked at with H2S or especially any of the other chemicals that we looked for during the studies that could potentially be like an itchy burning eye sort of symptom? I mean, is there a way to acknowledge that that might be something that we could be, that folks could be experiencing? Sorry, Brandon, I'll put it to you first because I saw you on mute. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll take a first step. So we do know that hydrogen sulfide can cause eye irritation, and eye irritation that is sufficiently severe or sufficiently strong can feel like, you know, burning eyes. So that's certainly a possibility that is what caused it. But I think that's all, that we can't say definitively that that's what caused it, because that could be caused by other, certainly other chemicals in the air in Kalamazoo, or, you know, it could be caused from allergies. But it is certainly, that is a known side effect of or symptom of hydrogen sulfide exposure. So it is certainly possible that is what caused the burning eyes. Okay, yep, I appreciate that. And then the second question, so Brandy, I'm gonna kind of set the stage on this one for you too, just a little bit when before we kind of put it to my panelists, and I'm not exactly sure who I think might be the best one to answer this. So I might throw it to one person and then have them throw it to somebody else. But we're talking about the toxicology report that Brandy's referring to. I think most of us on the panel have at least know what she's talking about, what she had sent to us. But her question was, do we think that the difference in what the guy that she dealt with saw and what we saw in all of these other studies could be a result of some of the improvements that the wastewater treatment plant has been making and that graphic packaging has been making? And I think there's two issues that I kind of see with this. Number one, we don't necessarily have a lot of like real-time long-term data from before all of these things happen. So even the study that Brandy's referring to was, we would consider more of a short-term study. So we don't have like a really long-term evaluation of that. What we're going to see is we're going to see more long-term evaluation of sort of, I don't want to say after the fact, but maybe during and after kind of thing. So so that's kind of a limitation to, I think, answering that question definitively. I think that there's definitely things that, like Monica talked about, and Monica, I think I'm going to have you talk a little bit more about that, because we might have some folks that might not have heard some of the things that have been going on even before an enforcement action is finalized, improvements that have been being made, potential reductions and things. I think you have been maybe getting even less odor complaints, which isn't always, you know, a cause and effect, because people get tired of calling. We know that that happens as well. People get fatigued in calling. We would still encourage you to call if you're experiencing odors, but I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit. I think we definitely have some more experienced folks. Marta, you might be able to chime in on some of those kind of long-term sampling. Would we expect to see some, you know, differences in that? But Monica, if you can talk a little bit to that question first, I would appreciate that, I think.
Sure. I mean, in terms of different mitigating activities for odors with graphic packaging in the wastewater treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant has essentially kind of decentralized their air scrubbing units. So they used to have one or just a couple of scrubbers where they were pulling all the air to those scrubbers, but now they have a lot more of them in different areas of their facility that they're pulling the air. And that may be reducing odors coming from the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant. I know they've been trying out some different chemical additives for their sludge bins before it gets carted off to wherever it goes after it leaves the facility. And graphic packaging, like I said, they've been trying out some different chemical additives to their clarifier, which is where their wastewater is treated. And they've also installed a temporary oxygen injection system. So that in conjunction with their peroxide treatment in their clarifier, it seems to have been reducing odors. Now, whether we're getting fewer odor complaints because of that, I can't say. I know the Kalamazoo wastewater treatment plant has also implemented an online and call-in system for complaints. So don't know if, those complaints that would normally come to me are going there or not, but that's also a possibility as well.
So Marta, do you have any sort of insight just on your experience with doing the GMAP? I know there have been potentially not in this area specifically, but in other occasions, maybe where you did a before and after, where that you might have some insight on some of those monitoring changes.
Sure, I can speak to that. I can't say I don't have an answer of whether the controls that were implemented by graphic packaging result in us not finding hydrogen sulfide when we were out there. Ideally, you'd want to look at, like you said, Jennifer, longer term data monitoring that happens before the controls were put in, and that continues after the controls are put in, to get a good idea of how effective those controls are. What we can say with the monitoring data that we collected is that for those 3 days, for that moment in time that we were out there, we were smelling odors, but we did not see any hydrogen sulfide. It may be attributed to some of the controls that were being put on.
Yep, thank you for that. And again, I know there's definitely going to be some limitations in a lot of these studies that we have done because we don't have sort of a before and after. So there's been a couple other questions. And Keisha, you did talk a little bit about this, but if you can talk a little bit more and maybe just in a different way about how the National Air Toxics Assessment data looks a little bit at cumulative information. So the question is, of course, H2S is the focus, but because we know it's not the only thing that may be in the area that could cause respiratory issues, what about H2S in combination with some of these other compounds that may be there? So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that. I know we didn't necessarily do that kind of an evaluation, but I think you had some good insight earlier, if you don't mind talking about that in a little bit different way. And maybe there's a way that we can share links to that data, because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the National Air Toxics Assessment data, and that data itself can be a little bit overwhelming, although there is an interactive element to it. And EPA has done some really good sort of public outreach kind of trainings on how the public can use that data. Again, to me, even as someone who does mappy things, it's a little overwhelming, but if you could just talk a little bit more about that, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and thanks for posing the question again. It is a really important question. We are focusing on H2S because of the odor concerns, but there are also the respiratory health concerns that may be associated with the odors, and they may not. And so thinking about everything that might be, all the pollutants that might be contributing to air quality is really important. With that, as Jennifer mentioned, we have the National Air Toxics Assessment that looks at a subset of pollutants that are known to be both relatively toxic as well as to be present in the air in a way that makes us want to pay more attention to them, essentially. And as those are being considered, what the National Air Toxics Assessment does is that it takes the national emissions inventory. So it looks at emissions and air pollutants coming from facilities. It looks at emissions coming from traffic, even from natural sources. It looks at all of that and considers it, models it out. So by that, I mean, it does like a computer simulation to see what someone might breathe. And part of that assessment looks at the combined respiratory risk from breathing in a number of these pollutants, that specifically their most sensitive organ that they affect is the lungs. It is the respiratory system. And when it looks at these together, then we can get an idea of their combined effect on the lungs. And so that's the type of information that the National Air Toxics Assessment gives us for a subset of pollutants. And we have that information for on a screening level type of level. We have that information for the entire nation. And so that's a general overview of that information that we can pass along. And I'm not remembering the specific numbers right now, but I think, Jennifer, you had a really good point of this is a really important question, and just sharing that that information is available and that we can pass along those links so that folks can look into that for themselves, or at the next presentation, we can talk more about that. With that, just always wanting to point out some of the limitations. When hydrogen sulfide, for example, is a pollutant that's not in that assessment, and there may be some other pollutants that are not in that assessment that may affect respiratory health. So that's important for us to consider, but it does give us a good idea. And we do know that there are pollutants like ozone that we have monitoring for and that people can get updates about, where they're not directly emitted from anywhere, but to the person's question, when pollutants interact in the environment, they cause ozone. So it's called a secondary pollutant because it's not directly emitted from anything, but that could affect the respiratory system. So there are a number of pollutants that we can consider and discuss more so, and the levels that we see in this area, and how we can consider that in terms of air quality and health.
Yeah, thank you for that. I always think I call it the NADA data, or you can call it the NADA data, the National Air Toxics Assessment, because we do love our acronyms here. It's really, really interesting, but unfortunately it does definitely have some limitations to it. There was a question in here and I was just kind of glancing it over, and I don't think that I've got staff that can answer this appropriately, but I'm gonna throw this to you, Monica, to see if you remember. And if you don't, we can definitely get back to this person on what their question is. So, and it's a really good point. And it could just be that I was misrepresenting things when I was chatting earlier, but the question is, like, just talking about Rule 901 isn't really enough. We even acknowledge that we consider the fact that there would potentially be odors from wastewater treatment plants, from paper production facilities. It's definitely something that we know is present. So the acknowledgement is that it should have been looked at during the permitting process. So I think that this was done, but I don't know if you remember detailed enough information to speak to it, or if we would have to get a permit engineer, which we don't have with us tonight. I apologize. And I don't remember enough about it to speak intelligently. So Monica, do you have any insight on that? Otherwise, we can definitely get back to you on what evaluation was done on that.
Concerning 901 specifically for the permitting process, I don't remember. I know that during the permitting process, we do take into account, how high stacks are, so things can be removed from the area more quickly. Things like that would be potentially some odor mitigating techniques that we would use, but I'm not sure about anything else that was evaluated.
Okay, and that's fine. I'll respond back to the asker just with my email address. And then if you want to just send me an email and remind me of what your question was specifically about the permit applications and Rule 901, we can definitely get, the permit engineer was Ambrosia Brown. So I can either chat with her and get some info and pass it forward or whatever on that. Actually, I don't know if she was the original permit engineer, so I shouldn't say that, but we can definitely get that information for you because I know it was done, just don't have a big enough brain right now to remember specifically what we did to deal with that. So we've got a few more minutes here. We do have a couple other comments. This is more of a comment, and this is a really important point. So I want to make sure that we just acknowledge this. So the person says, it's hard to know what all these numbers mean. It's hard to look at them and say, how does this affect my real life? How does this affect me on a day-to-day basis? Like, great that you guys did all these assessments. Wonderful that you're looking at it. You're putting all this information out there, but what does this really mean? And I think I just want to reiterate that, this meeting, we knew we were not going to have all the answers for you. We wanted to make sure that folks knew about those short-term potential things that we had looked at to kind of let everybody know that there wasn't a short-term concern with the things that we had measured, with all the studies that we had done, and that we still have all these other things that we're looking at. But we don't want to just leave everybody wondering what the heck's been going on over the last year while we've been working and you've been wondering. So this is a great, initial meeting. I know it was very long. We're going on 2 hours now. So folks probably are feeling a little bit overwhelmed on all this information. I do want to share with you how you can get a hold of the staff people that you've heard from tonight. I know there was questions we didn't get answered. Some people asked their questions anonymously, and that's totally fine. But if you decide you don't want to be anonymous and you want to kind of have a little bit more interaction, or you want to get your question answered more directly, you can definitely feel free to reach out to us. Like I said earlier, Monica's going to be our point person. She doesn't have all the answers, but she knows who does, and she'll definitely get those for you. So just really interesting on all the questions that folks have been asking. I think that we got to the crux of some of the issues here for sure. And I really appreciate that, that it's hard to know what these numbers mean in real life. I know that can be very frustrating to try to assess. I think some of the things that we're going to be working on, the health consultation, should help address some of that. But there probably will be more questions that we'll have to continue to work on finding out the answers for you. So really appreciate all the questions that you guys have had tonight, and thanks for my panelists for being willing to be on tonight and addressing a lot of those. We did get a couple questions about, how are these health risks being measured against residents who've had COVID? I know the health department is doing a lot of COVID investigations and research. It's not really something that we can address tonight, but I think we've got Brandon and Bill on the line, so I can pass forward your contact information in case they can connect you with folks that are working on that. I think that's a really good question as well. Okay, so there was another question about a specific water testing technology. And again, I apologize that we do not have the right staff on here to answer that question tonight, but I appreciate the methodology, and we will definitely try to get an answer for you on that. So before we sign off tonight, I know I had promised to kind of talk to you about where you can find some more information. So like I said, that website that we have been maintaining for all things graphic packaging, which kind of extends a little bit to the area around graphic packaging. So community that we're looking at here and we're speaking to tonight. So you can find a lot of information on there. Again, please reach out if you're not finding what you're looking for. Let us help you get there. I don't want folks to be frustrated looking at EGLE's website and being frustrated about it. So again, that website is Michigan.gov EGLE Graphic Packaging, and EGLE Graphic Packaging is all one word. So it's Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government, /EGLE Graphic Packaging, all one word. So what you can find on there is you can find a lot of the work that Monica's been doing. She has her inspection reports on there, all the violation notices that she has issued to the facility. Additionally, you can see the responses to those violation notices, which I think sometimes are interesting as well. So what has the company responded back to us on that? You can find information about the permits that they have, the air permits. We're talking specifically air quality information here. So you can see the odor plans. There will be a link to the recording of this meeting. Like we mentioned earlier, the engineering study is now on there. The study that Marta talked about earlier, the GMAP study, the mobile monitoring study, is also linked on there. Again, that some of those might feel like a research project if you look at them. I'm just letting you know, but please, like I said earlier, do reach out to us and ask us questions on things. This slide, I think I still have some folks that are calling in. They are very great listeners tonight, but I will just go ahead and give you Monica's, oops, sorry about that. Got a little slippery fingers there. Monica's information, so you can reach out to her if you're on the phone and you want to jot this down really quick. So again, her name is Monica Brothers, and her email address is brothers, so more than one brother, brothers, and the letter M as in Monica, and it's at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. So brothers M at Michigan.gov, and her direct line number is 269-312-2535. So I also have on the screen right now, and I'm going to read this number out too for folks that are calling in. This is our pollution emergency number. So if you feel you are experiencing a pollution emergency, we would encourage you to call the pollution emergency number. And that number is 800-292-4706. So if you have an odor complaint or concern, you can also go online at on our air quality website. It's just Michigan.gov/air. So it's really easy, Michigan.gov/air. There's a link right on that homepage that says submit an air quality complaint. You can click on that if you feel more comfortable doing it online. And then that will get forwarded to Monica so that she knows that somebody's having odor issues. It is usually faster to call her. I'm just putting that out there. But if you are experiencing, some kind of other emergency pollution related, feel free to dial that 1-800 number as well. So again, we really appreciate all the work that you guys have done with listening tonight. I know it's kind of probably felt a little bit like a job today. So I know you have a lot of other things you'd probably rather be doing with your evening. So we do really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Like I said, if you registered for the meeting, you can definitely get all the information that we will be putting out. We'll contact you directly. We'll get you on our email list. You might get more information than you ever wanted. So please let us know that as well. If you're calling in and you want to be put on an email list, if you have an email address, please just send Monica an email, again, brothersm@michigan.gov. And she can make sure that you get on that list, because we want to make sure that you get the information that you want to get when we have it ready. So that being said, I'm going to let you guys go tonight. I know you're probably about done hearing me talk. So thank you so very much. We'll work to get these slides out and ready. We do need to make sure that they are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, just to make sure everybody can view them. We have a lot of maps in there, so we want to make sure that we get those all good for you. But we will post those. We will post the video. So if you called in tonight, but you want to watch the recording, that will be on our YouTube channel, and that is at Michigan EGLE on YouTube. So again, thank you, panelists. Appreciate all of you participating tonight. Thank you, community members and others. Greatly appreciate you participating tonight as well. We hope you'll reach out with any questions that you might have in the later days. So take care and have a great rest of your evening.